shumë më aktiv me përfaqësuesin e tyre Lajçak në këto bisedime, si do të ndahet roli i SHBA-s dhe i BE-s, a mund të arrihet një marrëveshje brenda këtij viti? Për këto dhe shumë çështje të tjera, në një intervistë ekskluzive për Rubikon kemi ambasadorin e Shteteve të Bashkuara të Amerikës në Prishtinë, zotin Kosnett. Your Excellency, welcome to Rubikon.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me, Adriatic.
Thank you. The leaders of Kosovo and Serbia are expected on Saturday to have their first joint meeting after a while, but this time at the White House. There were many speculations about the topics that will be discussed. So what is there to expect from this first meeting?
Well, first of all, I expect continued speculation up until the meeting begins on Saturday and even afterwards. But as my colleague Ambassador Grinnell has explained, we expect the focus of this meeting to be on economic cooperation between Kosovo and Serbia to the benefit of the people of both countries and the region. You know, we have frequently said that we think it's important for the focus of discussions between Kosovo and Serbia to be on how to benefit ordinary people's lives.
So the issues will be of economic nature, nothing political to be discussed there.
Mm-hmm. We've made clear that the focus of discussions at this meeting will be economic, and that our European friends are going to initially focus on political relations between Kosovo and Serbia. I'm afraid I can't offer very much more in the way of detail on the specific agenda on Saturday. We'll just have to wait and see.
And do we know who is traveling to Washington? Everyone confirmed so far, so there will be both presidents, prime ministers?
I think that people certainly want to travel. We'll see who actually arrives. I say that only because it's a very busy time, and as you know, transportation is very complicated right now. So I know that both President Thaci and Prime Minister Hoti are expecting to travel, and we'll see who is able to make it from the Serbian side.
And this will be the first meeting of this new dynamic of the dialogue. Can we expect more meetings at the White House or some other place mediated by the U.S.?
I think I'm just going to leave it there. Let's see how this first meeting goes and then see what happens afterwards.
And we are still at the premises that in the end we're going to see an agreement reached by both sides, which will have recognition of one another.
That's our goal. Our goal eventually is to see a comprehensive agreement between the two countries that will set the stage for better economic and political relations that will really help the citizens of both countries and the entire region build a better future. But as interested as everybody is in what's going to happen on Saturday, I think I'm just going to have to hold back from speculating on the specifics of the meeting.
But U.S. did recognize Kosovo as an independent state, so the U.S. cannot mediate in something that the end goal will not be independence, of course.
Yeah, we certainly we recognize Kosovo's independence. There's no question about that.
And you expect Serbia to recognize Kosovo in the end of the process?
I think that that is the goal that we are aiming for. And beyond that, I'll just leave it there.
And recently, the U.S. Special Envoy for Kosovo and Serbia dialogue, your colleague Richard Grinnell, has claimed that the idea of land swap between Kosovo and Serbia was never President Trump's policy. According to Grinnell, it was the idea of the former American National Security Advisor, John Bolton. He claimed that Bolton's foreign policy stances were always in opposition to those of U.S. President Trump. Does this mean that there is land swap, the land swap idea will not be discussed at all?
We have said many times that the U.S. is not pursuing a land swap between Kosovo and Serbia. I've said that many times. I think that any a comprehensive agreement between Kosovo and Serbia needs to have the broad support of the people of both countries. And it's clear, I've said this before, that there is very little interest in Kosovo for some sort of exchange of territories, land swap. And Ambassador Grinnell has made it very clear that this is not an idea that the United States is pursuing, and that it has never been the goal of the Trump administration.
And did this need to to be mentioned earlier and talked about wider from American representatives? Because before, the U.S. ambassadors were saying also the territorial integrity in Kosovo will never be discussed. And then this changed to depends of the will of both sides.
I think that our position has been consistently clear on this, that the United States has not been pursuing a land swap, that we're not even sure where that idea really came from. I can't tell you that nobody has ever spoken about it, but I can tell you, as I have before, and as Ambassador Grinnell has, it's not the policy of the United States. It's nothing that the Trump administration has ever supported, has ever pushed, and we've said that many times.
And what is the idea of compromise? What could the compromise be?
You know, Adriatic, I know that you and everybody else in Kosovo would love the answers to these questions, and right now, I really can't say any more than that. Let's see how the meeting goes on Saturday, and let's see what happens afterwards.
Former Prime Minister of Kosovo was saying that he did not travel to Washington when he was invited because there was a secret agreement waiting to be signed, and it would be more risky if he would attend the meeting and then leave than not to travel at all. What's your comment on that?
My comment on that is you will have to ask the former Prime Minister why he believed that. That has never been our position.
Never.
No.
And do Kosovars need to be afraid of this dynamic of the dialogue?
No, I don't think so. I think Kosovars should look at the discussions that are underway under the auspices of the White House as an opportunity. You know, we have frequently talked, Adriatic, about how America's goals for Kosovo are the goals that we think the people of Kosovo have. Better relations with the neighbors, better relations among communities here, economic development, which means not just more foreign investment, but also unleashing the power of Kosovo's private sector. And we also think that fighting corruption and building rule of law in Kosovo is important. These three strategic goals are interconnected, and the effort to improve relations with Serbia is critical to the economic development of Kosovo. So we don't think the people of Kosovo need to be afraid of this. We understand it's new. You know, it's stepping out into the future, and that can make people nervous. But the status quo in Kosovo is not sustainable. You know, I first lived in Kosovo in 2003, and when I came back in 2018, I was very impressed by the progress Kosovo had made on many levels, including some progress on economic development. But it was also clear that much more needed to be done. And I will tell you that many of the people I spoke to when I came back, in the political world, across the political spectrum, but also in civil society, in the media in some cases, in the 15 years I've been away, they've become rather comfortable with the status quo in Kosovo, where Kosovo's international friends pumped a lot of money into the country, provided a lot of assistance. And the effort to improve relations with Serbia, you know, had really become frozen. And one of the messages that I've had as American ambassador is that the status quo is not sustainable. Kosovo needs to move forward, you know. The United States has, over the years, provided a great deal of economic assistance to Kosovo, but other kinds of cooperation and assistance as well. We have experts at the embassy from the Department of Justice, the Department of State, working to strengthen the rule of law institutions here. We're strengthening the Kosovo security forces. I could go on and on. The USAID has been working on municipal governance, on the agricultural sector. All of the investments we've made in Kosovo are meant to strengthen the country's self-sufficiency so that it can rely less on the United States and other international partners in the future. I think the United States and Kosovo are going to remain very close partners. I have no doubt of that. But I think it's natural that our relationship evolve to one that is a more equal partnership.
Now, what to say to the critics that say that the issue between Kosovo and Serbia is not of economic nature, it's a political issue?
Well, it's both. It's both. But people need to understand, citizens need to understand, that improving relations with neighboring countries is going to benefit them. That's why we started out over the last few months in looking at very specific economic projects that could benefit citizens. And in doing so, we've talked to the business communities in both countries. We've talked to ordinary citizens. Again, I don't want to get too far into this because we're all waiting to see what happens on Saturday. But when we signed, when Kosovo and Serbia signed letters of intent in Munich on aviation, on highway travel, on rail travel, the idea of these agreements is to improve the lives of ordinary citizens. I mean, now lots of citizens of Kosovo find themselves waiting for hours and hours at the border with Serbia. We think that that eliminating that problem will help with trade and investment. People ask why we have talked so much about air links between Pristina and Belgrade, and it isn't only that a lot of people will fly there rather than driving, to save a few hours, although I think that will happen over time, especially as business connections improve. But it also means that people in Pristina will be able to fly to Belgrade and get air connections elsewhere in the world. These sort of regional connections are good for business. They're also good for ordinary citizens.
And also based on recent history, this is not the first negotiation that Kosovo and Serbia are having. During the war, there were Rambouillet talks, then Vienna process, and in both times, in the end, Serbia didn't sign the agreement. So now the reservations are that what if we step up as Kosovars and make some compromise, then in the end Serbia again will not agree, sign, or fulfill?
It's always easy to talk yourself out of sitting down to resolve problems, but you don't make progress in any contentious relationship by ignoring the problems or refusing to talk. You make progress by talking. And I think the fact that the United States government, the Trump administration, is deeply committed to making this process work should be seen as very important to Kosovo's future.
Do you see Serbia's leadership willing to solve the issue of Kosovo?
I think it's in their interest, or they wouldn't be participating in this process.
And when this Saturday meeting was announced, Serbia's President Vučić said that first he needs to go to talk to Russian President Putin on 24th of June before flying to Washington. So do you see any role of Russia in these talks?
I think we'll have to see what happens. Oh, and now people say, oh, he said we'll have to see what happens. That means the Russians are going to get involved. I know you're going to, I know. Look, let's just wait and see what Ambassador Grinnell and our other colleagues in Washington accomplish with the delegations on Saturday, and no more hypotheticals. Okay, and the question of Russian involvement is a pretty blue sky hypothetical. So let's just focus on what's real.
What about the EU process? Mr. Lajčák, who is the mediator, special envoy from EU, just visited Kosovo last week. He said in an interview, exclusive interview he gave for Rubikon show, that the EU has the sole mandate from General Assembly's resolution to mediate the talks, and he sees himself as a primary negotiator between the sides. How does U.S. cooperate, or is there cooperation with Mr. Lajčák?
I'm not going to speak for Mr. Lajčák. There's certainly cooperation between the United States and our European friends, and we'll come back to that later.
Mm-hmm. So, and do you see that the solution will be found between Brussels and Washington and Belgrade and Pristina?
I think you're asking hypothetical questions that I just can't answer, Adriatic. I think there is a role for the United States, there is a role for our European friends, and we'll see what happens next.
And also, Washington asked both sides, Serbia to stop its derecognition campaign, and for Kosovo to drop all the tariffs towards Serbia, and also not to ask for international organization to become member of or international organization. This was highly criticized within Kosovo. Mm-hmm. It's the first time that Kosovo will not ask to be part of international organizations. Is this temporary?
I think it was necessary to get the parties to the table, and we'll see what happens after that.
Everything depends on this first meeting.
Let's see what happens at this first meeting.
Also, former Prime Minister Kurti said that also U.S. wanted him to step down and to change the government of Kosovo. What's your comment on that?
So I think that coalitions come and go in Kosovo. It is a feature of politics in Kosovo. The Vetëvendosje LDK coalition was, a fragile one. People in LDK made their own decision about how they wanted to move forward. We did not hide the fact that we were dissatisfied with elements of the Kurti government's foreign policy, just as we did not hide the fact that we were dissatisfied with elements of the Haradinaj government's foreign policy.
What elements?
Well, in particular, and this is well known, we made it very clear, we're public about it, that we thought it was necessary for Kosovo to take a bold step forward in dropping the tariffs, in dropping the reciprocal measures. Somebody had to go first, and we would get a response from Serbia afterwards, okay? We made that very clear. We did not order anybody to bring down the government. That's just not what happened. We made very clear what our foreign policy desires were, and politics played out in the manner that they did. I'm well aware, I assure you, that there was a lot of dissatisfaction among that in some quarters in Kosovo. There still is. One comment I would make there is that, there will be elections in Kosovo in the future. And there are very active parties in Kosovo, in opposition, in power. They flip their roles, and they continue to do their jobs. I don't think that the leaders of Kosovo's current opposition parties, believe that they don't have a political future. So I think that the next time there's an election here, they will have the opportunity to make their case to the people of Kosovo. So once again, I'd like to look to the future. I think that Kosovo has a vibrant democratic system, and I think that it's important that the citizens of Kosovo, not believe that decisions about their future are going to be made elsewhere. The fate of Kosovo lies in the hands of the citizens of Kosovo.
But what to make of the criticism that people went out at 6 October, voted for the parties, Vetëvendosje came out as the first party, and then someone else is leading the coalition government, and Vetëvendosje is in opposition?
I think that is a function of the democratic system, the multi-party system, and the Constitution of Kosovo. And of course, I understand that some people are frustrated by that. There are other people who are quite content. Now, let me say this, that when I've spoken to Prime Minister Hoti and to other members of his government, they have been quite open that they understand that there is a strong public desire for progress in Kosovo, and not just on the economy, not just in fighting the pandemic, but in also fighting corruption and on rule of law. And I think that Prime Minister Hoti knows that public expectations of his government are very high. And we expect the same things from the Hoti government that we expect from every other government, that they take anti-corruption seriously, that they develop an economic program that will move the country on the road to self-sufficiency, and that they also take bold steps to improve relations with the neighbors. So I think that it's very important that the people of Kosovo, as they would with any government, that they pay close attention to what the Hoti government is doing and make their views known.
Vetëvendosja is calling Hoti's government illegal government. And while talking also for the 27th of June meeting, they are saying this illegal government should not take responsibility to discuss the fate of Kosovo.
Mm-hmm. Well, of course, we don't consider the Hoti government to be illegitimate. I think that the Constitutional Court has made that clear.
And also, the Constitutional Court decision was unbiased and was professional.
We respect the Constitutional Court. I respect the people working on the Constitutional Court. I will say this, that I think it's important for any government in Kosovo that says it respects the Constitutional Court to respect all the decisions of the Constitutional Court and not pick and choose. So that's something else that we'll be looking at in the future.
How do you evaluate Kosovo dealing with COVID-19 pandemic?
Mm-hmm. I think that, and I'm going to speak now not as a foreign diplomat, but as a resident of Pristina. I mean, I live in Kosovo.
You've been staying here all the time.
I live in, yes, I haven't left Kosovo since before the pandemic, since February. I live here with my family. We go to the supermarket. We go to the bank. We walk the dog. We live we live a life. I have to say that I think that that my neighbors could be doing more on an individual basis to fight the pandemic. I don't think people are wearing masks very often. They're not maintaining social distancing. And this is something that the authorities have been pretty consistent in urging people to do. I mean, of course, we can't keep businesses closed forever. I mean, that's not realistic. And the government of Kosovo, like every government, like the American government, has to find a way to balance the public health response with the need to keep the economy moving forward. So, of course, businesses are going to reopen. But I think that a lot of people don't really fully appreciate the severity of the situation. I could say that about the United States too, Adriatic. I mean, as in all the issues we talk about, America doesn't have all the answers. We have our own social problems. That's painfully obvious. Our own economic problems. Our response to the virus has, like everybody's response, has been a slow process. The pandemic caught the world by surprise. And so just now, governments are starting, I think, to bring it under control. There's a great deal more that needs to be done. And the United States is doing what it can to help Kosovo. We have provided so far over $1.6 million in assistance. Our medical professionals have consulted with Kosovo's medical professionals. We're even talking about things like the embassy's public affairs people helping the ministry to message better to the people about what individuals can do. I think that it is important that we look at a problem like a pandemic, not just on a national basis. So in that regard, I think it's important that Kosovo continue to work with neighboring countries on regional solutions to the problems, because disease does not stop at borders.
Mm-hmm. And we also have seen people gathering to do manifestations, to do political protests, and also there are talks about organizing new protests in Kosovo. what if this will happen during the pandemic situation?
Well, this is an issue in other countries as well. I think that nonviolent demonstrations, peaceful demonstrations, are an important part of the democratic process in Kosovo, as in the United States, as elsewhere. At the same time, as you suggest, it's important to think about the public health aspects of it. So, you know, in a perfect world, people would have demonstrations while maintaining social distancing, wearing their masks, washing their hands, taking those sorts of measures in order to minimize the threat from the pandemic, and that's certainly what I would encourage. But it's also true that non-political events, you know, sporting events, any big public gathering, you know, people cramming together in restaurants and bars can spread the disease. So I think we all have to be aware that that this is a public health problem and not just not a political issue, not an issue to be politicized.
And also, MCC funds were unblocked, and this is the process that will have no more obstacles in the future?
Well, we had placed a temporary pause on MCC programs because, and my colleagues in Washington have made this clear, our view was that you know, the government of Kosovo should not assume that if it was taking steps that the U.S. disagreed with, that there wouldn't be any kind of response or implications. All right. The MCC was quite specific that once the tariff problem was resolved, that MCC would lift the pause. So it's back to business as usual. But when I say business as usual, it's important to understand that when MCC and our Development Finance Corporation and other American agencies, AID, are looking at investment projects in Kosovo, we're looking for projects that make economic sense, that are sustainable. You know, we don't just hand over cash to governments or to individuals. You know, when we do agricultural projects, we're not just handing out money to farmers. We are supporting projects that are going to increase the sophistication and sustainability of agriculture here. So that's the philosophy we use when we look at economic cooperation projects in Kosovo.
And also, there were talks about U.S. Maybe considering to withdraw the troops from KFOR mission in Kosovo due to non-cooperation from Pristina. Is this something that is considered to be on the table?
So the United States is always looking at its force posture around the world, at the presence of its military forces everywhere. It's an ongoing review. And you know, we look at it, we look at this from the perspective of what is going to support safety and security around the world in different places. And in that sense, you know, I don't think anyone expects that KFOR will exist forever. You know, if relations between Kosovo and Serbia improve and tensions are reduced and true peace comes to the region, then at some point there'll be less reason for KFOR to be there. And that's a success, you know, when that day comes. I'm not going to speculate about when that day will come. But, you know, people, again, in Kosovo, as in any country where the U.S. has cooperative programs, should not assume that the United States doesn't have any say in how this works. You know, that the future of the U.S. presence in KFOR is ultimately a decision that the United States government will make, just as we will decide the presence of our troops in Germany or Korea or anywhere else in the world. But when I say that, I want to reassure you and reassure your viewers that, you know, KFOR is there for a reason, but it's not there forever.
And U.S. troops are here for a reason and will stay until they are needed.
U.S. troops are here in KFOR to protect the safety and security of the people of Kosovo and to maintain stability in the region. And, you know, we don't consider that we have permanent troop presences anywhere in the world.
And also, while we talked about EU, Kosovo, and US policies. Mr. Grenell is criticizing EU for not granting visa liberalization for people of Kosovo, although the EU considers that Kosovo fulfilled all the criteria. Do you have a comment on that?
We believe that visa liberalization is important to the economic development of Kosovo and Kosovo's ability to play an active role in the economic development of the whole region. So yes, we believe strongly that the European Union should fulfill its past assurances on visa liberalization for Kosovo.
And we also see some of EU officials saying, okay, why does US not grant visa liberalization for Kosovo citizens?
We have different laws. We have very specific laws about when a country moves from having a visa requirement to having visa-free travel to the United States. It's not a policy decision that the United States administration can make, but it largely depends on the economic vibrancy of the country. So again, all of this is interconnected. As Kosovo's relations with its neighbors improve, as Kosovo's economy improves, then the likelihood of Kosovo qualifying for visa-free travel to the United States will also improve. So I think that getting on the road to prosperity includes the prospect eventually of changes in the visa regime.
Ambassador Kosnett, it was a pleasure having you on my show.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Rubikon me Adriatic Kelmendin përkrahet nga Bira Peja, Interex, Mobile Karagach, Shpar dhe Cima Construction.
Nxito dhe përfito aplikacionin Art Motion për 3 muaj